begin the morning with some morning humor. And the groan. I heard a groan just kind of go around. Man. Yeah, I know. We need to be excited because I found a story about this older couple. They were standing in this hotel lobby asking the clerk for a room, and they were being specific. They were wanting a room that had either a king or a queen bed. And the clerk said, "I'm sorry, but we're almost out of rooms. The only thing we have left would be a room with 2 twin beds in it." Well, the man was disappointed. He says, "I don't know. We've been sharing the same bed for 44 years. And the wife interrupted, "Could you possibly push them close together for us? Could you just push them together in the room?" Well, a couple of people smiled. They thought that was so cute, and they were listening in, and the clerk just kind of commented, "How romantic. You can't stand being apart for even a single night." The woman finished, "Well, it's not exactly that. It's because if he snores, I want to be close enough to him I can still get him in the ribs with my elbow." All right, well, I announced last week we have a theme verse for our new series, John 12:46, which says, "I have come into the world as light, so that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness." I asked you to say it with me last week. Can we do that one more time? Would you say this with me? John 12:46, "I have come into the world as light, so that whoever believes in me may not remain in darkness." What a glorious... I was thinking about this a little bit as we were singing that song, Chainbreaker, right? That how the light can come into our lives and break chains, help remove pain, help bring healing and hope. I mean, the light has come into the world that we don't have to walk in the darkness. I've noticed some people, and actually even believers, I've noticed that some believers still hide from the light. They might believe in God. They might believe in Jesus Christ. They might be a part of kind of a community. They might like learning things, but they're still hiding from the light. They don't want the light to maybe expose something. They don't want the light to affect them or change them. They don't want the light to really get in there. Kind of like going to the dentist. I went to the dentist this last week. And the dentist is, it's good for you, but I hate going there. It is not something I look forward to, and so. But I recognize it's good, and they get in there and they clean and they scrape and they do all this stuff, and it's just not fun. But it's helpful, and it fixes things. It does all kinds of things. And sometimes I know that there's people that know God, but they're hiding from the light. And they don't want that light to shine into their life. And they're afraid what he's going to find. They're afraid what God's going to do. They're afraid what God's going to say. And so they just push him out. Now, I know some Christians, they like to offend with the light. They're kind of the opposite. The light is something that they can just shine on the rest of the world and blind them with everything they got. Scripture, they get their scriptures and they're just ready to just kind of throw that at somebody. They're looking for a fight, and trying to get somebody. They're ready just to kind of take the light of Christ, and it's a way of just kind of destroying everybody else in their path. I don't know if you've ever met somebody like that, but it's been around. I've seen it, or maybe it's a bit of a unicorn. It's out there somewhere, but I've heard it exists. I just want to walk in the light. I want to walk in the light and know that I am with God, and know that the light of Jesus Christ is within me. The light is here to bring help and hope into people's lives. And what the light does for me, how the light encourages me and illuminates my way. I don't have to stumble and wander. I don't have to fall and get hurt in the darkness. In fact, Proverbs 4:19 says, "But the way of the wicked is like deep darkness." Deep darkness. I asked that last week. Have you ever known darkness in your life? I mean, the wicked, the way of the wicked is like deep darkness, but or because they do not know what makes them stumble. I mean, sometimes people are stumbling around through life, and they're falling, they're tripping, they're getting hurt, they're making mistakes everywhere, they're struggling, everything's going wrong, and they have no clue as to why. they don't know why. They're stumbling in the darkness. But we get to walk in the light, and it brings guidance, and it shows us the way, it illuminates our path. It tells us which way to go, and it gives us hope again. So we can walk in the light. Now to do that, or as we do that, we want to help bring the light of Jesus Christ into the world. We want to bring that light into the world. And how do we do that? Well, in a word, I mentioned last week, we're starting this series called Oikonomics. And it's kind of, I know that's probably an odd word, and we'll get into the meaning of it in just a minute. It's a bit of a Greek word and a transliteration that's kind of mashed together. But before we do that, I want to read out of Jeremiah 29. So you can start looking that up if you are prepared this morning. Jeremiah 29. And in this portion of Scripture, Jeremiah is writing a letter to the exiles in Babylon. In 1597 BC, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon takes siege against Jerusalem. And at the end of that, he deports thousands of Jewish nobles and skilled craftsmen and takes them back to Babylon to become leaders and workers, and takes some of their wealth with them, and obviously to flourish their kingdom and their communities. And he takes them, and this event, if you will, this time period, there actually were other times that they came against Jerusalem and took more people, and there are actually other wars that took place during this time. But in Jewish history, they refer to this as the Babylonian exile. And thousands, tens of thousands were like slaves. They weren't necessarily in chains and under guard and things. They were kind of living there. But they were held captive in Babylon. And during this time, even leading up to this exile, the prophet Jeremiah was serving the Jewish people by, as an oracle of God, trying to tell them what to do and trying to help them understand how they should live through this difficult time. He gives them warnings. He gives them instructions. But predominantly trying to help them handle this period of their history. And so in chapter 29 of the book of Jeremiah, we find this letter. And we won't read the first 3 or 4 verses. They kind of describe what to do with the letter. He says, send it to these people and these people. This is who I want to read it, and so forth. And how he wants it to be shared around. And then in verse, actually starting in verse 4, he starts to give the instructions then of how they should live while they're in exile and captivity in Babylon. Let's look at verse 4. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat their produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease, but seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. And we'll stop right there. How do we respond today to cultural captivity? Yeah. I mean, do you ever feel like we're kind of in a cultural captivity state today? Ever feel like our culture has shifted in such a way that now, being a follower of God, being a Christ follower, we are more of the minority. We are more of the marginalized. We are more of the pushed aside in our society. A society where we used to celebrate and enjoy religious freedoms. To some degree we still have, but more and more we're getting pushed out. And more we are, if you are a believer in Jesus Christ, you are becoming the exception and not the rule. And so how should we respond? What should we do? How do we live in this world that is even starting to become hostile towards Christianity? How do we respond to this cultural captivity? Well, again, I've noticed that some take kind of the Exodus approach. Looking at Jewish history, if we go back, they were in a time when they were in a very pagan nation in Egypt. They were slaves. They were oppressed. They could not worship God the way they wanted to, but instead they were surrounded everywhere by all kinds of pagan practices and idols and worships. And they wanted to be led out of captivity. And they prayed for 400 years that God would lead them out of this captivity. And finally, God answered their prayers, and very miraculously, he leads them out of Egypt. They exited out of Egypt, and they took off, they left, and were able to go into the promised land where they could start their own culture again. And they could return to the life that God had commanded them to live. And they could return to a place where they could worship God. And sometimes I think we have people within the Christian family that think the Exodus approach is the way we should be living. Whatever is of the world, whatever is of their culture, whatever is going on, we just need to exit out of that and kind of exist amongst ourselves. We have to abstain from all of it. We have to get away from it. Don't be around them. Don't go to those places. Don't do it. Just kind of, when your neighbor's coming down the street, just go the other way. Whatever they're talking about, just change the subject or go somewhere else. Or whatever you have to do, there's kind of this exit mentality. Let's get out of this culture because it has nothing left within it that we should be a part of. Now, others take more of an invasion approach. You remember when they walked across the promised land, and this took some time, and even a generation that left Egypt died off, and it was a new generation that took the promised land. But they were to go in, and when they got there, they found out that the land was already occupied, that there was enemies in the territory, that they had to first expel these enemies before they could take over the land. And God directed them to go in and invade. The Battle of Jericho is kind of where that began. And eventually they took over more of the land, and they would start spreading out and taking over more land. And the goal was to defeat their enemies because they were enemies of God. And they invaded the land and they took it over. And they took it for God and they claimed it back. And sometimes, as Christians, we kind of take this invasion approach. That our culture has gotten pagan, our culture has gotten wicked, our culture has gotten evil. We need to go back and reclaim land. We need to go in and our faith is a battle cry. Scriptures are our directives, and we should win back what the devil has taken away. And we have this invasion approach to our neighbors around us, that they become our enemies and we need to win some territory back. But notice that the exile strategy had a different approach from either one of these two. It wasn't an abstaining and get away from it, nor was it a kind of a fighting, an invading and then taking over. But instead, he said, I want you to act a little differently while you're there. And I wonder if there's some implications for us to maybe learn today. So let's take a look back at it, beginning in verses 5 and 6. What did he say that they should do? While you're in exile in Babylon, here's what I want you to do. First of all, I want you to build houses. Now, he's not saying you need shelter. It's going to rain pretty soon, so get a little lean-to built up. No, he's saying build a home. You're going to need a home, someplace to live, someplace to, keep your things, prepare your meals, be together, get out of the weather, and so forth. He's saying build homes for yourselves. And then he goes on, he says, now, and then I want you to start growing gardens. Now, I don't know how many of you are growers and have grow gardens, but it's difficult for me to get into gardening. And the reason is because it takes so long for anything to come from it. It is so much easier just to drive to the grocery store and get what I need. And so what's he saying here? Grow gardens. You're going to be here a while. You're going to plant, and you're going to watch it sprout, and it's going to finally start to mature, and eventually you're going to be here long enough. You're going to see fruit and vegetables and things that are born off of your efforts as you grow your gardens. Then he goes on and even further, he says, and then while you're there, you know what, you might as well go ahead and get married. And then you might as well, you're going to be there a little while. So you're going to, why don't you go ahead and get married, and then go ahead and get married, and then go ahead and have some children. So now we're looking at 9 months at least. And it's pretty easy to see, no, we're looking now out a few years. And he says, then grow your children and marry your children and let your children bear children. And he's helping them to think generationally, because you're going to be there a long time. You're going to be there quite a while. We're not just, this isn't just a time. We have to understand, I don't know that we understand the gravity of what it meant for the Jews to be living in Babylon. It's clear that they hated it. I mean, who of us would like this deal? To be ripped out of your home, to be paraded away, living in a foreign land, under foreign control, in foreign environment and culture. And now God's saying, and I want you to settle in and get used to it for a while. I want you to realize this is going to be this way for a while. And they had to kind of settle in. And they needed to not only go through this for a long time. He's saying, I don't want you just to survive, but while you're there, I want you to actually thrive and do well. Get married, have children, increase your numbers, know the blessing of a home, know the blessing of good food, know the blessing of even seeing your children grow up to give you grandchildren. I want you to do well and actually increase and thrive. And then in verse 7 he says, and while you're there, seek the welfare of the city and pray to God on behalf of the city. For when the city is blessed, you will be blessed. When the city's doing well, when the city's prospering, when the city is at peace, when the city is getting along, when things are going well, you get the advantage of that as also. You get to be a part of that too. In other words, if food is in abundance, if the economy is strong, if you can work to reduce violence and strife and problems, if you can see progress and innovation and increase amongst the culture, you're going to benefit from that too. So live there in Babylon, get used to it. You can hold on to your Jewish history and monikers, but I want you to seek the blessing of the city and actually pray that God will bless those people. This would have been very, very strange instructions to them indeed. This would not have made sense at all. They were certainly waiting for the next time for God to kind of miraculously rise up and rescue his people and show his power and authority over all the world again. But this time he doesn't. He says, you're going to stay there because I've got some other things that I'm doing. This city, the city of God in Jerusalem, is in ruins. The people are in captivity. They've been enslaved in a hostile land. They have to live under a sinful pagan culture. They can't pray and gather and worship God the way they want to and have been instructed to. Think of the story of Daniel and all of that and what was happening there. And what's their instruction instead? Be a blessing to your captors. Pray for those that are of the city, of a different nationality, of a different religion, of a different practice, of a different principle. Get along with them and look and seek the blessing of the city. Now, Brad Briscoe is a director of bivocational church planning ministry. He said this about this passage. He says, the point is that the way the kingdom takes root in the lives of people and ultimately changes a city is by exiles living normal, everyday lives as citizens of the King in every neighborhood and public place that makes up the city. This is how missionaries go into foreign lands, into other areas, and they make a difference for the kingdom. They embed themselves in the normal, everyday life of the culture of the city where they are placed, and they start finding ways to be a blessing for the cause and the purpose of Jesus Christ. And so here's the thinking. The kingdom goes forth by embedding ourselves in the everyday life of our city, building our homes, growing our children, doing our jobs, living amongst our neighbors, family members, friends, and bringing the light of Jesus Christ into every situation as we do. I mentioned this last week. What do you think about when you think about evangelism? Because in a word, that's kind of what we're talking about. How do we think about this idea of sharing Jesus with our city, our community? Maybe images like this come to mind. I got new pictures this week. Greg Laurie and his Harvest Crusades. This is a picture of, tens of thousands of people. Greg Laurie's ministry, Harvest Crusade, has now reached nearly 10 million people, and with over 500,000 people coming to Jesus Christ and making decisions for the Lord. This is one that comes to mind often, Mother Teresa. She started with nothing and was noticing the children in the slums of Calcutta that had nothing, food, no education, and so she started a school just teaching children and trying to be a blessing to the kids. Later on, she began the Missionaries of Charity, was her organization, Missionaries of Charity, which grew to over 1 million co-workers. Over 1 million people work for this charity now, all around the world, covering over 40 different countries. And she started with absolutely nothing except a heart to serve people. This next one, now you know these two folks, Michael and Edna. And I wish I was just a little bit brighter. They're pointing at just a blank piece of ground that they're pointing out to. And last week, we purchased that acre of land for the orphanage. So there's the future site of the CEO orphanage. It has just been plowed, and it currently is being used for farming corn. So they decided that we're going to plant another crop because it's already prepped. All they have to do is go in and plant the corn and grow at least a harvest of corn and use that money they get from that harvest to begin a building project down the road. So that'll be coming shortly, but we've begun. And how exciting. It's been a long road to get here. Or the last one. Here's the last one. Wait a minute. Who put that bozo up there? I don't know how that got in there. But I throw that up there just representing that sometimes when we think of evangelism, what we think of the professional that we hire to do the work of ministry or mission or evangelism, when each of us is called, each of us has opportunity. Each of us can share the light as we embed ourselves in the lives of our community. We can share the light of Jesus Christ. Now, what does that look like? Well, this series is about capturing a new vision for what this could look like. And so I want to share a video with you. It's called Love Your Neighbors, a Simple Step. And this is so underdramatic, you're going to think, what in the world is this about? But we'll just take a look and then we'll continue this morning. I think as I watched that film, I thought one of the most powerful statements in it, for me anyways, was when he said that just saying hello to somebody or bothering them, I forget how do you say that? If you walk up to somebody and greet them to learn somebody's name or be neighborly or friendly, and it feels like that you're bothering them, that to bother people is just not acceptable in our, when did that become the norm, right? When did we become so disconnected at people that just saying hello is something that bothers people and is unacceptable anymore? Yeah, there's a lot of things that's contributed to that. But just being friendly and neighborly. This last winter, as you know, we kind of got this late snowstorm and snow, and it built up quickly and heavily. And we got this massive ice dam down the one side of our house on the, kind of on the east side where it doesn't get the sun. And I've been trying to get to know my neighbors and do a better job of that. Just being outside, saying hello. And I've got a couple neighbors that come and they like to help me. They actually have some neighbors that come and help with a couple things at the church even now. And but he came over and says, you got this ice dam and stuff. I've got some heat tape and a ladder. Can I just put that up there for you? I'll take care of it. I'll just put it all up there. All you have to do is plug it in. And what a blessing, and he did, and within a day it had all melted off and saved the roof and the siding and all that. And I'm thinking, here's just a neighbor that's being more neighborly than I, the Christian, the pastor, just being friendly and neighborly and kind and getting to know somebody in your life. Now it's because of work, of trying to meet them and to reach out, and there's others I'm doing that too. I've mentioned we take the food kits over to Whitman School. And these food kits, we deliver 40 food kits a week, and they go to specific kids that are identified as being some of the highest need of food poverty, and that they get free or reduced breakfast and lunch at school, but on the weekend they might have nothing. So on Fridays, the teachers discreetly kind of sneak these food packs into their backpacks. So it's anonymous and all that, and the kids are not singled out as being poor or something that way. And they got to take these food kits home. I remember when we went to the school and told them that we were interested in helping them with this. And the counselors that we met, she was, cross-armed and a scowl on her face and kind of holding back. And she, what are you here for? Right, Sarah? you know what? It's not because she's saying, what are we here for? What are we going to do? What kind of new work am I going to be giving her? What kind of problems am I going to make? And here I'm with the church, right? So what about that? Can the church be in the school? Can we do this? And all these kinds of questions. And now I walk into school and I got carte blanche to go anywhere I want, and I could walk right in and start talking to the principal. The counselors love it when I come walking in because they know that we're just there to be a blessing. Because we're blessed, we get to bless our city. And for right now, part of our city is Whitman Elementary School. And we can just be there. And it's led to other opportunities and other conversations, and relationship is growing and building. They've come to us and asked for other things. Some of the counselors have opened up a little bit about their faith and where they're at, because we've just built some bridges into the school. So let me skip down to this idea of oikonomics. Let's unpack that quickly and we'll be done for this morning. How can we do this? How can we just embed ourselves in our community and does it make a difference? Does it do any good? Well, this idea of oikonomics is just a way of taking simple, everyday steps and using them to try to make a difference in the world. Try to walk in the light of Jesus Christ as you're doing things that maybe you're already doing. And explore how to do this. I'm talking about this word oikonomics, and what it means is this is the English word that is derived from oikonomos is economics. It's derived from the Greek word oikonomia, and its meaning is household management Oikos means family or extended family. And nomia means administration or law or principle. So it's kind of how you govern your family. Oikonomos is just the family management is really what it's talking about. And that as we understand that, the oikonomia or oikonomos or oikonoma are all different forms of the word. And anytime you see the word particularly in the New Testament, that talks about stewardship. So being a steward or stewardship or anything along those lines is this word oikonoma or oikonomos. And it just means that we are called to manage the resources that God has given to us. We are stewards of what God has blessed us with. And there are 5 capitals in our life that we can use to make a difference in the world around us. And we're going to unpack these over the next few weeks. But consider 1 Peter 4:10. As each one has received a special gift, employ it in serving one another as good stewards, there's our word, of the manifold grace of God. As God has blessed you with any gift, any blessing, any resource in your life, then be a good steward of that resource for the purpose of the manifold grace of God. He mentioned in the video how they were challenged just to find some time just to get to know their neighbors. That's one way that time is one of your resources. I mentioned last week, what if you just over the next, we're in week 2 now of the 40-day purpose, the 40 days of Oikonomics. That's what we said. 40 days of Oikonomics. So we're kind of in the middle of week 2, about a week and a half, leading up till Resurrection Sunday. And so what if you try to find one way to bless somebody around you as a representative of Jesus Christ? Well, here's some areas you could look at. Here's the 5 capitals of Oikonomics. God has given us enormous opportunity and responsibility to grow and invest our life's assets to bringing His light into the world. The first one is spiritual. These are not necessarily in particular order, although the spiritual one would be the best one to think of first. How do you invest your wisdom and power for kingdom purposes? What does it look like to spiritually invest what God is doing in you and what God has given to you and what God has given to you and be a blessing in the world around you? So you have a spiritual resource. The second one is physical. What will you do with your time and your energy? How can you use your time and energy to make an impact in the world? What responsibilities do you have to manage your time well for God's purposes? Or to manage your energy, your strength, even your health? Number 3, you have relational capital. By building a relationship with other people, you build equity into their life. You get to know your family and your friends, and they begin to trust you, and they begin to look at you and watch you and think about you and how you live your life. And as you're living in proximity to other people that you get to know and that are around you, you can demonstrate that God is in you and you're walking in the light of Jesus Christ. Perhaps one of the more obvious ones that gets probably too much press is financial, but it is an important resource. Our world runs on money. So how can you maximize your financial treasures for kingdom purposes? What portion of your finances are you managing well so that you can use some of it for God's kingdom and things that will last beyond you and your temporary needs? Last one, number 5, intellectual capital. You have intellectual capital. You can use your knowledge. You can use your creative power. You can use problem-solving opportunities. You can use your intellect and your knowledge to make a difference in the world. And people are coming up with increasingly creative ways of sharing the gospel message into the world around us. How can you do that? How can you bring knowledge into somebody's life and be a blessing to them for the purpose and the cause of Jesus Christ? So those are the things that we'll unpack further as we go along. And hopefully you're getting a sense, this is just an opening, an intro, if you will. What does it look like to embed our lives into the city around us and intentionally be thinking about bringing the light of Jesus Christ into the situations that we're a part of?